Hello, Andrew Hebard here with the Ahiflower channel, plant-based omegas for a regenerative health and a regenerative planet. Today, I'm delighted to be here with Richard Bazinet, a professor at the University of Toronto within the Department of Nutritional Science, a world-renowned expert and leader in the area of brain lipid metabolism, and currently serves as the Canada Research Chair for Brain Lipid Metabolism. Richard, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Hi, Andrew. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So you've had a phenomenal journey through digging deeper and deeper into research and culminating with your current seat as the Chair of Research or Canada Research Chair. Could you share with us a little bit about your journey as you've got deeper and deeper into how dietary fats impact health and wellness, and particularly brain health?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my studies in the field of nutrition as an undergraduate and went on to do graduate work with Stephen Cunnane at the University of Toronto. He's since left here. And we were studying fatty acid metabolism in the context of inflammation, which I think is an important area. And then to make a long story short, you remember those days when PowerPoint presentations always got slowed up and you're at a conference and they had a hard time switching them? Well, I had just given a speech at a conference, and the next talk wouldn't load up, and I had a pleasant conversation with somebody who was interested in brain metabolism. And he invited me for a fellowship at the NIH, which I took to study brain lipid metabolism. And so we were able to put together some of my PhD work and, into my postdoc. And then I came to Canada with my own independent position after that, and just got really interested in using kinetics and quantitative approaches to study omega-3s, not just that they're in the brain, but how much is in the brain. And then not just that you eat them, but how much do you have to eat to, figure out how much gets in the brain. So it was a series of, training opportunities with exciting people, and then putting those skills together to set up a research program.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to jump straight in here. One of the objectives of this series of interviews is really to help the consumer understand and maybe pick through a little bit about omega-3 nutrition, why it's important. There's a lot of confusion around the three-letter acronyms. And also, many of us over the last 3 or 4 decades have been brought up under the sort of environment that to get complete and balanced omega nutrition, we have to take it in the form of preformed EPA and DHA, mainly from fish oil or krill oil, or out now more latterly algal oil. And without that, we're kind of shortchanging our metabolism from having a complete and balanced nutrition for health and wellness and longevity. And I think recently your research is maybe showing that sort of 3-decade-old, 4-decade-old research really needs rethinking. Is that a fair statement? And could you share your observations with us?
Yeah, so I think, what happens in research is, there's a discovery, and some of these discoveries, I think with fish oil 30, 40, 50 years ago, were really exciting, and the field kind of moves that way and pushes that forward, and things get left aside. What we were able to come in and do in this field, especially in the context of the brain, was get a little better idea, not so much heart disease, but, how much do you need in terms of omega-3s to get the brain? And then, there's this controversy, or it's been a long-term controversy, where you've got the brain has a lot of DHA. So everybody was saying, well, eat DHA, that's simple. And that you couldn't really convert the plant precursors to DHA. And what we've shown, at least in the context of the brain, is that, yeah, you actually can do a pretty good job there. And so we've been able to, I think, I challenge the dogmas, one way of phrasing it, or maybe just go off in a little direction, tangential, and kind of clarify some things is another way of looking at that.
That's hugely impactful, particularly in this climate, as people are looking for or making decisions based on sustainability and ethical sourcing and that sort of thing. And as you say, there's maybe dogma. It's areas of controversy around the sources of omega. But to say, and certainly the years that I've been studying it, it's been very much a fact a stated fact that humans are inherently inefficient, almost incapable of manufacturing DHA themselves. And your research is kind of upending that statement.
Yeah, so I think the simple way of saying it, our research shows that's just not true, but I think a lot of people knew it wasn't quite true. I think what we did was a little different. So this conversion question can be laid out, I think, simply. People have used pretty good methods, and they show things like the conversion is 1%. So you take these plant-based precursors, and about 1% of them can get converted to things like DHA. About 1%, it varies. And 1% is a low number, right? If you give me $100 and I give you $1 back, that's a low rate of return on your investment. 1% is just low. And so I think people got into that mindset. What we did that was a little different with some of these kinetic approaches is we said, well, how much do you need? Because if I'm only giving you $1 back, it's not a lot. But if you only have to buy one little candy, it's more than enough, right? To buy the little candy. And by changing the question from 1% being low to how much do we actually need, I think we find out that this 1%, at least in the context of the brain, is what we think is more than enough.
So, it makes me think about, again, the comment that we are innately inefficient or incapable. Is it maybe that we are actually very capable, but we do it in a limiting way that we only convert what we need? And,
Yeah, absolutely. Nutrition's got this interesting thing with it where, more is always better. That's kind of a stereotype in the field. If some vitamin C is good for me, more is better. So I think there's similar ideas around this conversion. And what we're hypothesizing now is that this 1% is enough, and it's actually regulated. And so if you're not getting enough, you ramp up that conversion to use it. But interestingly, when you start consuming more DHA or EPA, you even slow down that conversion even further, and you've got a homeostatic or a regulation around there. So absolutely, it looks like the body's kind of pre-programmed to make a certain amount, an amount we think you need, and adjusts around that.
So we're pretty good, and I guess evolution would be a good sort of support to this. That we're pretty good at being able to find a diverse array of feedstocks from the environment around us and have our body actually do the conversion of those feedstocks, maybe rather than take the preformed, the end product. You're saying that we could actually, our bodies have adapted through the environments we're in. We've co-evolved to use the materials on hand, and in doing so, we might be getting more of a benefit than taking preformed fatty acids.
So the the evolutionary diet is very controversial. One of the theories I like is that there is no evolutionary diet. There's a whole bunch of them, and humans have adapted to a variety of different diets, some which would contain fish and some which do not. And we've got this homeostatic ability to make EPA and DHA from plant-based precursors like ALA, and you're interested quite in SDA. And if we happen to be eating fish, we slow down that regulation. Now, what is optimal? That becomes a really complicated question. I think there's evidence that EPA and DHA do things independently of just this conversion process. But what we're challenging is those that say, well, you can't make enough. Clearly, at least in adults, you can make enough, and you can regulate that synthesis. The idea that you decrease your synthesis when you consume a DHA, it's almost like it says, hey, there's enough of me, stop making me, suggests that, yeah, there are a few approaches to this path. And when I started nutrition, not that long ago, but it was all about health outcomes, right? What's the healthiest thing? And now health outcomes need to include sustainability in the environment. Right. These are huge issues, the biggest questions on the planet right now, how to deal with this. So yeah, plant sources can be considered, optimal ways of doing this in some contexts.
So one thing that I think the omega industry has in common, we all share a similar, at the sort of pinnacle of our hierarchy, if you like, is that we recognize that human intake of omega-3s is significantly below where it needs to be. And part of that is because of the offset between elevated levels of omega-6 because of commoditized agricultural crops such as soy and corn, etc. So we share a similar overriding drive to create awareness for omega-3s and boost intake. But when we get down to the sources, as you say, that's where a little bit more controversy comes in about whether it's plant-based or marine-based, whether it's sustainable or whether it has a finite supply to it. One question that many of our audience and customers have is, so I hear all this and I can't dedicate enough time and energy to become an expert in the whole area of lipid metabolism, but I am looking for an alternative because of either sustainability or taste preferences or lifestyle where I can incorporate more omega-3s into my diet, such as salad dressings and beverages and that sort of thing. The question that we hear very frequently is, can I confidently and safely dial down my marine oil intake and upscale, upregulate my plant-based omega intake and still meet my daily sort of quotient of omegas? What would your answer to that section of the population be?
So, you know, as a nutritionist and not a dietitian, and as a researcher, I get to answer these questions in a more complicated fashion. Maybe. I actually think people can do it, but you need to be careful. There's a few things out there that we need to be careful with. One are these omega-6s that have been dialed up. They've been dialed up, you know, so high historically, we've never been at these levels. So that leads some of my colleagues to say, well, the omega-6s are so high and they compete for this synthesis, and they maybe, you know, they challenge the synthesis such that we should just forget about this and go with the fish oil products. It's an argument to be made. But I think if you know, there's at least two approaches I'm interested in. Dial back the omega-6s, then, you know, you've got a path forward. The other thing, and part of the reason we're excited to work with you guys and your products, is that the competition starts at what I can call the first step, this ALA to LA kind of battle for an enzyme called the delta 6. The SDA is an exciting tool here because it gets to skip that fight. It's the next step in the pathway, a little closer. So I think we need to do more research, but I'm very excited about that as an opportunity to, you know, the reality of the food supply is so backwards in some places that people don't even know they're consuming these omega-6s. And it's going to be hard for them to dial it back down and decrease their intake. So maybe we can not worry about that as much and get around that step.
Yeah, it's a fascinating point. I'm very much a visual learner and a visual thinker. And when I try to sort of visualize that metabolic pathway that you mentioned, I've always seen in my mind it's like a turnstile at a rugby game. I don't understand football and soccer, but rugby I do. And it's, you imagine sort of like the All Blacks in New Zealand playing England at a rugby game, and the teams or the supporting teams are 20 to 1. There's 20 English people for every New Zealand guy there, and they can't get through. They all have to go through the same turnstile, and that's like omega-3 and omega-6 going through that single metabolic pathway. And guess what? If you don't increase the number on one side of the turnstile, you're not going to increase the number of supporters in the stand on the other one. And you've set this rate limiting step. And I think if we can, you know, it's like increasing the number of All Black fans there, increasing the number of omega-3s, we would have a more even transition through that turnstile and then metabolize to longer chain fatty acids.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I know nothing about rugby either. We should have had a hockey conversation, but you know, in your analogy, what we're hoping is to, you know, maybe not even have to worry about going through the same gate. Maybe make a special door where you just get to jump over the gate, or, you know, sneak in the back kind of thing.
And that's exactly where I was going with that. So our Ahiflower has this wonderful ability, because of its stearidonic acid content, to sort of bypass that turnstile. So you kind of don't have to show your ticket or get your barcode stamp. You can get, you know, you get in for free, and it's actually evening the game. It's evening the balance of the other side of the turnstile.
Yeah, and without, you know, lowering the omega-6 contents, or in this case, the opposing team's fans, right?
Right. And I'm I'll apologize that I've just taken a very high level science subject and brought it down to the lowest common denominator.
That's all right. That's all right.
So Richard, the research that you've done and the partnership you've had with our business has been phenomenal. Yes, you've helped guide our thinking around omega-3 nutrition. You've helped guide our thinking around the importance of the type of omega, where it comes from, and also the sustainability. Are there any sort of closing comments that you would have for our audience based on your research around Ahiflower and sort of looking into the future, a crystal ball as to what this might mean 3 or 5 years from now for the consumer?
Yeah, so I always like to put out a couple caveats first. The research we're doing is not in the context of things like neurodevelopment. I think preformed sources of DHA are important for the developing brain and these things. But what we're talking about is adults who have to make food choices. And I'm really excited about this. Obviously, we need to do a bit more research and push some of these things forward. But the young nutritional scientist today and the consumer, has real questions about, the origins of the food, the safety of the food, the ethical, the way it's collected, and the environment. The environment is now a part of the nutritional sciences. So we're excited to be able to take another tool and to be able to push that forward to test the hypotheses, anyways, that yes, plant sources can be converted enough to supply the adult human brain. And in this context of omega-6s, maybe we can skip that step and get around that, and we'll push that forward. And then I'll say, one other important thing is genetics. And, some people seem to be really good at this conversion at that same spot, that kind of delta 6 kind of turnstile thing that gets stuck. Some people seem to be a little better at it, and conversely, some people seem to be a little worse at it. So maybe, a product like Ahiflower can get around the genetics, or the security guard, if I can go to an analogy, to help us push forward. And this could, this has potentially really big implications, as vegetarian and vegan diets are really popular. I don't think they're a fad. I don't think this is gonna, like the cabbage soup diet, disappear in kind of 10, 20 years. I think this is a real big movement. And they're interested in nutrition, ethics, and the environment. So giving these people more options in the food supply, I think is a fantastic idea and a very important route forward.
Yeah, no, that's a great closing note. Thank you. It absolutely is. As I say, ultimately, I think we're all looking at this through a similar lens, which is improving our dietary fat intake for better health outcomes, better health and wellness and longevity. So Richard, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your most recent research. And I hope the rest of the summer continues to go well.
Thank you. We're pushing this forward, and hopefully we'll have some more updates for everybody soon.
Okay, thank you.